Hello and welcome to a very special episode of the Astrocast. I am Brad and I am joined here tonight by
Theff,
Mataspore,
and special guest
and Dr. Wilko. Yes, hello. The person who is sometimes mentioned, I think, at the end of your episodes, or you might have heard me in the adverts that I stick on the end of your edited
so
episodes.
you're the one.
Yes,
Yes, it's me. It is
we
I.
finally caught him.
So yes, this is Dr. Wilko of Unparliamentary Language and Hat of Many Things, also on Tinker Tailor Soldier Sponge. Jesus, why could I not say that? And
It's really hard to say. It's really bad from a branding perspective. I assure you, it's great as a web address. It's a terrible thing to try and say TTSS Productions every time.
jeez, yes,
And I'm aware.
it's not the easiest. So Dr. Wilko has recently re-entered the hobby and is wanting to know what the hell is going on. So I think we could have started with
Yeah.
well,
You step out for a few years, you come back in, and what the fuck happened here?
I mean, exactly. I think maybe if I just give a quick summary of what I know, and if this is going to be like 3 specials split up, we can take this as read for all 3 specials if you listen to them all, dear listener. But I got into the hobby in 1999 when someone, while I was preparing for a school play, someone plonked in front of me this giant black tome with, I think, Black Templars on it, called the Warhammer 40,000 3rd edition rulebook, which I actually still have on a shelf behind me, having retrieved it recently. And I then played it. I ran a club at school. Senior school, we had a club where we actually managed to convince the school to buy the Warhammer box set, the 40k box set, and some Blood Bowl for us, because one of our teachers was into Blood Bowl, and we managed to run that until I was in year 12, 13, and then had to, worry about going off to university. I played a bit during undergrad, and then when I went off to do my PhD, I had my stuff, but I found it increasingly hard to find people to play with, and eventually I just sold the whole lot of it, pretty much. Like, I sold off fully painted armies. I made back all the money I'd spent on it over the years, but I've always had that itch still to model and paint. And it's all Brad's fault. So firstly, this podcast started up, and I was listening to a GW News podcast that has sadly seems to have met its demise. It was really good, and it did a lot of the RPG stuff. And that was kind of scratching my itch for the lore. And then that disappeared. And then fortunately, Brad was like, I'm going to start up this Astrocast thing with some friends. And I was like, oh, well, sure, we can host it, etc. And then Brad and a few other friends were like, come and play Oldhammer, 6th edition Warhammer, in a lovely house in the Cotswolds. And we had a lovely day out in the sun where I completely trounced Brad's empire with some ogres that aren't even mine.
Yeah, that happened.
It was pure luck and rolling really well on magic rolls. And I was like, oh, I've missed this. And then recently I was able to get hold of the Indomitus box, even though it's not available anymore for a reasonable price. I didn't spend over £200 on it on eBay. I bought it for about 160 quid, including delivery, which I think works out still.
That's still a really good price for it. I think the Space Marine Heroes are like 80 quid on the GW site. So
yeah. So I'm in the process. I can probably share some photos for the show notes, but I have put together 10 Necron Warriors, 3 Scarab Swarms, and 2 of the Necron Heroes as of today. The box only arrived the other day, so I'm starting up again. And my question I put to you now is, what on earth happened to 40k?
Have you read the updated Necron lore?
I have read the updated Necron lore. So yeah,
Okay.
I started off. So I read. I was Necrons when they first came out in 3rd edition. I got into them, and I had like the old monolith and all of that. And then I obviously, as I said, I've sold all of that, so I don't have any of these nice old models anymore, sadly. But yeah, I read the Necron lore back when it was Necrons have no souls, and they're the star gods. I always get this wrong. The Catan or the
Catan.
Sutan?
Catan is I think the
Catan. Okay.
Duncan says Catan, so go for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, when they were kind of in charge, and now they have like more personality, and there's a whole load of different dynasties, and that's really cool. I still haven't decided what paint job I'm going to do on them because I want to do the Sautek or Sortek dynasty. Yeah. Still not sure on pronunciations, but that's the boringest color scheme. So I might just paint them purple or something weird. Like, we'll see. But yeah, so that's kind of where I am with Necrons. But I think the big thing for me is I stopped properly playing in 5th edition. I did play some 6th edition games with some mates, but I did 3rd, 4th, and 5th, which were all quite continuous. And I listened to your last episode about mental load, and I watched that video from ATTRIBUTION. So yeah, I understand it got really bloated after that I missed out on. And then there was a big reset for 8th edition. And I've read the 9th edition rulebook, and I went, this seems pretty sensible. I'm still a bit weirded out by the fact that there's no blast templates and that vehicles no longer have armor values. But I can understand why they did that. But I suppose, other than like, I mean, I've read the rules, but like, what's it like going, like, what did I miss in between? And jumping from 5th to 9th, is there anything I really need to think about? Like, I assume the meta is so different. I hear that Tau are rubbish now, as opposed to completely dominating everyone with long-range weapons and stuff like that.
No, you just need to know how to play Tau. They've gone from being a very easy force to play to actually requiring some subtlety and nuance. Because I do, and I'm bad with them, meaning that they're either terrible now or much more likely you have to be good to play with them. So... yeah, self-deprecating humour rules okay. So, jumping from 5th to 9th, that is a hell of a jump. So I think...
It is quite a jump. I appreciate that. 7 years I've been out of the hobby, for reference.
Okay, so we need to give a little bit of context here, not just for 40k, but for everything that's changed since. Because, I'm sure you've kind of heard, 7th edition 40k, 6th was not around really long enough to make an impact, but 7th was the bloated mess that you find in the basement of a Lovecraftian role-playing game, and needed to die. In the same way that Old Fantasy had become a bloated mess, please see previous episodes, and needed to die. Hey, I stand by the statement. I tried. I really tried to play it, but I couldn't. Okay, we'll put that aside.
Previous episodes, it's covered.
Yes, I know.
So what happened was that Games Workshop underwent a major management shift and a major rebranding. Like, you'll see, all Games Workshop stores are now called Warhammer stores. For a more,
I had noticed that slowly happen. Yeah, I'm trying to remember the last time I went into a Games Workshop, and that would probably be around the time I stopped playing. And the one near me has been a Warhammer ever since I moved here, which was at least 5 years ago. So
they basically, about the time that Old Fantasy died and Age of Sigmar was born, there was a major shuffle in management, and the idea that hating your customers was profitable got thrown out along with everyone else. And all of a sudden, Warhammer stores were a much friendlier environment to go in and play in. They were much more encouraging of people just kind of casually getting into the game rather than trying to dump, say, I don't know, £300 worth of Dark Eldar on you as you walk through the door. We're not speaking from experience there, no, not at all.
What? I'd been paid.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm just saying. So what came of this was that all of a sudden, Warhammer had a Facebook page. And Warhammer Community was founded, and that led to people being engaged with, and suddenly people who were playing the games being treated like human beings rather than walking wallets with disposable income. Now, don't get me wrong, I am sure deep down we are still just disposable income dispensers, but they're at least pleasant about it now. And with that change in management, I think there's kind of been a chain of events, pattern forming, that everything that they do to Age of Sigmar, they then do to 40k later. So where we saw Age of Sigmar launched, 2-ish years, I think it was, down the line, we suddenly saw happen to 40k. I think it was 2017 that 8th edition dropped.
2017, because I just moved to Reading. So, yeah.
Awesome, yeah. So we suddenly saw 40k becoming accessible. It was no longer a bloated mess. There was an even playing field dropped. And instead of having 7th edition where it was competitive if you were willing to be a dick. And I think, people, there were a lot of power gamers, and you just have to look at the tournament meta for 7th to see just how bad it was. 8th edition leveled everything. Everything got a hard reset. You couldn't use any rules from previous editions going forward, because theoretically you could use a 3rd ed codex in 7th. It would be broken, but it would still play. 8th edition did away with all of it, gave us indexes, which were books that covered basically every unit, and, like I said, reset the playing field.
So this is a bit like with 3rd edition, where they released a book. So in the 3rd edition core rulebook, one of the things I remember distinctly from first reading is it had an army list for every army.
Exactly that, yeah.
Because they were like, we have changed everything, yeah.
And so 8th edition, my wife got into Space Wolves in 7th and found it an incomprehensible mess. I think she said as much at the time. And then 8th edition came out, and suddenly we could just throw down a game and play it together with very few issues. Like, obviously, you're still looking up rules, that kind of thing, but it just played well, and it was fun. And I think that was the big switch, was that suddenly it was fun for everyone, rather than just being a power gamer's nightmare.
Well, that's obviously encouraging to hear. I think a lot of things have been going through that recently. I mean, you only have to look over it. Like, I know at some point we might want to do an RPG episode that Brad said I could potentially come and guest on again. And like, you can see the same thing with 5th edition D&D. But I mean, that I can see parallels with other nerdy things.
Yeah, this is a future topic, I think. Yeah, definitely. Games Workshop suddenly grew a social media presence. Some people might say too much. I personally quite enjoy the sassy comments. One that came to mind was the change of rules in 8th edition, where any hero that had it was 9 or fewer wounds couldn't be targeted unless they were the closest model. And somebody commented on the Games Workshop community page on Facebook. So you're telling me that if there's one guardsman in front of Gilliman, I can't shoot at Gilliman? And the response from the Warhammer community team was, yes, exactly that. But if you can't kill that guardsman, what the hell do you think you're going to do to Gilliman? And it was just a wonderful response. Like, their social media sass is perfect.
Yeah, their social media team is very... They know what they're talking about. They know the memes. They know the jokes. And they are on point pretty much all the time. So that's kind of the rules. And then I haven't yet played 9th.
Yeah, Nurgle's rot, as it were. Let's just blame it on Nurgle and move on. 9th is a refinement of 8th edition. Very tight rule set. It plays really well. It brings in a few new little things that, maybe like, what's it called? Battle attrition, where after you take leadership, you then take more wounds if you roll badly. But, it makes the games play quicker, so not really a complaint there.
Yeah, I quite like... I mean, I don't want to go into a big deep dive on the rules, and I've seen there's probably a few comparison things we could put down, though they won't be comparing back to 5th. That would be a weird flex, I guess, for a YouTube channel. But like things like that compared to the old like leadership rules and stuff. All like I was reading through it going, ooh, I like that. So my general opinion, having read the rules, because they published the core rules for free. Wow. I was kind of blown away by stuff like that as well. So I read that. I now have, as I said, the Indomitus box, so I have the actual rule book. So I have to read the lore that's in there because I haven't read that yet. But in general, I was going through going, ooh, nice. That's my overarching opinion of the rules from a quick look. I haven't played it either, but so I'd love to hear how it actually plays.
It's good. I like it.
It might be interesting because, I say, for us to try and arrange a game at some point, Wilko, of 9th. I know we were.
Oh yeah,
because that might be quite a good one of kind of me coming from 8th and you coming from 6th. Playing 9th could be quite an interesting bit of content for future episodes.
Oh, definitely. I'd love to talk about that experience once this happens.
Once it's happened. So then the next thing to discuss is the lore. So you've got some questions about why is Gilliman? What is Primaris?
So, I mean, obviously, I know who Gilliman is. I have behind me Index Astartes 1 and 2. I don't think I ever got 3 physically, but I have a PDF of it. I was big into 40k at the time. I was like 15, 16. I read all the stuff. I had White Dwarf every month. If only we were so lucky to get every week.
It did go weekly for a while.
Yeah.
Did it? Wow.
Yeah, my wallet was not happy.
I heard there was also a digital version.
They did go digital.
I heard there was also a digital version.
Yeah.
Then not a digital version, and now there is a digital version, which is confusing. The one thing I know is they kind of went, finally, we're not going to be stuck in year 999 anymore. We're going to move the lore on a bit, which I appreciate, because it did kind of get a bit silly where we were playing through. Because I think, like, technically, didn't Armageddon happen like 200 years before the actual timeline we were playing in and stuff like that? So there was a lot of silly stuff.
The third war of Armageddon took place in M997.M41.
Okay. Not as far as I thought, but like, yeah, they kept having to like be like, oh, we're going to explain something that happened. And I remember as a kid, actually, the Eye of Terror summer campaign where we had to go on to Games Workshop like special website they made, and you would submit games you played against your friends, either in store or as friends. And the whole idea was that would change the lore somehow, and then it kind of didn't. So the fact that they have actually turned those knobs to make the time flow again is cool to me. But I'm missing stuff. There's gaps in my
you've
knowledge.
done there is created a perfect segue to the first thing that they did after this management change, which was to actually revisit the Eye of Terror, and they blew up Cadia. Cadia's gone.
Yes. And it was in no way a desperate attempt to make Abaddon not a failure.
Yeah.
Yes, Abaddon's 13th Crusade, which went boldly nowhere, much like Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, so in a really cool series of books, the, what's it called? Gathering Storm series. Yeah, parts 1, 2, and 3. There was the Fall of Cadia, where they put a Blackstone fortress through Cadia. There was the Fall of Bieltan, I think it was, or
the fracture of Bieltan.
Fracturing of Bieltan, that's it. And I'll let you talk on the Inari there because you know them better than me to actually play them. Go for it.
What now? Oh dear.
Yeah, if you want to.
Oh, dear. I thought we were just quickly abbreviating stuff, and I was going to talk about the Inari later.
Okay, cool. In that case, following on from that was the Rise of the Primarch, where, thanks to shenanigans, Guilliman is revived.
Inari shenanigans, which the Imperium was not happy about.
No, they weren't, but good luck telling Guilliman no at this point. And Guilliman basically hops on a ship, flies to Terra, goes into the Emperor's audience chamber, about an hour later comes out and goes, right, shit's fucked, let's fix it. And that's about where 7th edition died. The next thing we know, it's 100 years later, and the Indomitus Crusade has been launched. Do you guys want to jump in with the fluff that I've skipped over?
Right. So the Indomitus Crusade was a bit of a mess when they brought it into the lore. So when they first introduced the Indomitus Crusade, there was the Dark Imperium novel, which was released alongside the Dark Imperium box set, which was the starter set for 8th. And that was set 120 years into the Indomitus Crusade at the end of the Indomitus Crusade, which was a bit of a silly narrative move to do because they then kind of went, we've just jumped over 120 years we could have filled with history and models. So they've now kind of retconned a lot of that with 9th into Dark Imperium, the storyline of the invasion of Ultramar by the Death Guard, to being the midpoint of the Crusade. And they're kind of filling that out with the Dawn of Fire novels, which are kind of going through the Indomitus Crusade as it goes. But essentially, Primaris will bring those in. One of Guilliman's last orders before he died was to instruct the Archmagos Belius Cool, the only man who appears to be able to make anything new in the Imperium, to refine the Space Marines and give them an edge over the traitors. He gives access to all 20 Legions gene seed, all of the Emperor's research on both the Astartes and the Primarchs. He then goes away and busies himself in a vault on Mars, and 10,000 years later, after Cool has revived Guilliman, he takes them to Mars.
Cool revived Guilliman.
It was a joint effort. The armor of fate was just as critical. He then releases what is essentially the Great Crusade Mark II with the new Primaris Space Marines. Totally not a more trademarkable version of Space Marines. Now they are bigger. The in-law reason for this is they have a extra organ called the Magnificant, which is actually one from the Primarchs. That's why they're bigger. They also have a thing called the Belisarius Furnace. That's why they had 2 wounds. All Marines now have 2 wounds, and it's great. But, skip over that. So Guilliman then goes, brilliant, I've got new warriors. He organizes half of them into new chapters, which is the Ultima Founding, and half of them he forms into legion-sized formations called the Unnumbered Sons, and they're mixed formations of Astartes of different gene lines. The idea being, if they've all fought together, they will get rid of the problem of the distrust between different chapters.
Yeah, I would only add there that they do, of course, insist that there is absolutely no way that some of them use gene seed from the traitor legions.
Yes, in the same way that Belisarius Cool totally hasn't made an artificial intelligence version of himself.
Yeah.
So Gilliman launches this crusade and slowly starts reclaiming the Imperium. Because what happens with the fall of Cadia? Abaddon goes, I lost, throws a Blackstone fortress at Cadia, shatters the gate, which then causes a vast tear to rip across the galaxy, which is known as the Great Rift. So the galaxy is now split in half by a massive warp storm. Now this means that half of the Imperium can no longer see the light of the Astronomicon. This is the Dark Imperium. Nihilus. Exactly. So you have the Imperium Nihilus and the Imperium Sanctus. Imperium Sanctus can still see the Astronomicon. That is the quote-unquote safe part of the Imperium. The fact that every world has pretty much been attacked and it's a horrible flaming mess. Gilliman launches the Indomitus Crusade, starts reclaiming territory and handing out the Primaris Marines and Primaris Tech. He also convinces the Custodes to leave their mourning robes and highly oiled nipples on Terra and fly out to actually help fight.
No, don't leave the nipples behind. Just cover them and go with them.
So that's kind of where the lore is at this point.
Well, on the human side, you left out everything else.
So before we move off the humans, I think one of the reasons that I had the idea for this episode and to ask these questions is because I've read the new Space Marine Codex, and then I kind of was none the wiser and was like, oh, I thought they would explain this, but I think they took everything as read. If you played 8th edition, you'd understand what's changed in the lore. So they'd mentioned things in passing. They mentioned Primaris Marines, but they don't explain why they exist. So thank you for that.
Yeah, they're essentially what I like. I am quite a big fan of Primaris. I've been a big fan of Primaris since they've come out. They, especially in 8th, they felt like Space Marines always should have been in the lore. That they played really well, and the fact that they were correctly scaled, quote unquote, next to Guardsmen and the other stuff in the universe, they just felt good to play.
Yeah, because Space Marines have always been like 7 feet tall, right? But they're the same height as a Guardsman almost in miniature form. They're always like squatting weirdly in the tactical squad, as I recall. They've got this like bowed leg syndrome in the old one.
For stability.
Yes. Anybody wants to see a good retrospective on that, we'll just plug Snipe and Wibb's video on the retrospective of all of the Space Marine models, because just go watch that. It's easier than us explaining it. Primaris were also Games Workshop's chance to do true scale Marines, which is great. And we won't get into the debate on whether they're heresy or not here, because I know certain people tangential to this podcast would call them heresy.
I think the other thing that was good about like this summary is that as an outside observer who knew people who were still playing, I heard also, because was there like a 30k thing came out at some point?
Horus Heresy,
I don't want to sidetrack too much.
Its own thing. It kind of came out about 10 years ago, maybe
something like that.
About that, yeah.
Yeah, and that uses a refined version of 7th edition, and that works a lot. By all accounts, I've not actually played Horus Heresy. It's something I would like to get into at some point, and I believe there is strong evidence, but that we will be getting a new version of Horus Heresy coming soon. It's apparently a very different rule set, because initially they only had Space Marine versus Space Marine, so it was very balanced. And it's basically they looked at 7th and blew away the worst of the rubbish, and then refined what was left. So that's kind of Horus Heresy, and it is a very cool system to look into, but it is entirely Forge World. But that, again, might be changing.
Because the reason I ask, as someone who had a passing knowledge as stuff happened, like still knowing people who were painting models, whatever, I'd occasionally see this stuff, and I couldn't have told you because I knew that there was Gilliman around, but I just assumed that was a model for like Horus Heresy because I knew that they had this game where you could smash Primarchs together. So I just assumed that's what it was. So I mean, in summary, that was my impression as an outside observer. So it's good to have that all cleared up because I knew that Gilliman was now back, but I didn't really understand exactly what happened.
Sorry, just going to email that tagline to Games Workshop, just like Horus Heresy, the game where you smash Primarchs together.
I'm sure they.
Well, I mean, it's not an inaccurate description.
Yeah, true.
But the other thing I put Inari in there purely because I knew that Eldari is the new term for Eldar, which is just adding 2 vowels onto it. That I can understand.
Oh, yes.
But you mentioned Bieltan exploding, maybe?
No, it didn't
And there's some other
explode.
stuff. And
It didn't explode. Cadia exploded. We're much more civilized.
And Bieltan was next door?
Well, Bieltan just cracked a little. It's fine.
Okay.
It's in a few pieces, but it's mostly still together.
Yeah, pretty much. Sort of. Kind of. Maybe. Are we talking about the other side of the whole incident now?
Yes.
Well, I
cool.
think that was a segue
Awesome.
for you.
Right, Yanari. How am I supposed to explain the Yanari? Okay, it starts with it starts with this lovely lady called Yvraine. Yvraine was an Eldar, or Eldari, sorry, who'd technically been part of all the Eldari ways of life. She'd been an, what do they call them, Exodite, sticking it out on one of the Maiden Worlds. She'd been an Exarch, a warrior in the Eldari thing, and right at this particular moment, she's about to meet her end fighting as a Drukhari witch via one Lilith Hesperax in an arena. So yeah, Lilith shanks her very good. But then, unlike everyone else who Lilith shanks, she stood back up, which was very strange, because she'd been talking to the new Eldar god, the dead god. What was he called? Yanid, that's it. And the end goal of Yanid is to basically do the old switcheroo on the beginning of the fall of the Eldar and all that, and kill Slaanesh.
A bold claim.
Yeah, it's a pretty big... But basically, it's the whole... whenever an Eldar dies, Yanid gets more and more powerful. And eventually he'll wake up and throw down with Slaanesh. The overall aim and point of the Yanari is that maybe not every single Eldar needs to die in order to trigger this. That's basically it. So most of you got to die, but not all of you got to die. Is the overall hope of the Eldari race at this point. And basically, they go off on a big kind of recruitment thing, supported by the Harlequins. Eventually, they make it to Bieltan. There's a great big argument, because obviously their whole thing does depend on the death of much of the Eldar race, and some of the Eldar are opposed to this. So there's a big kind of slight civil war. And then eventually Yvraine gets to the heart of Bieltan. She pulls out this magical 1 of 5 crone sword things, which are important somehow and have always been there. Don't ask questions. And with it, she wakes up this ultra Yanari demon thing called, what was it called? The Yinkan. That's it, which is like a demon, but not.
Is it just like is it a bigger avatar?
No.
Or is it?
Well, sort of. It's sort of like an avatar, but the avatar is, it's a fracture of Cain who is dead. The Yinkan is a fracture of Yanade, but Yanade is alive. He's just asleep.
Okay.
So
a subtle
sort
difference.
of, yeah. It is difficult to understand. But yeah, a lot of stuff happens. I don't really. If I went through all of it, this would be a lot longer than half an hour. But basically, Yvraine goes off across the cosmos with the Vizarch, who may or may not be wearing the original Dark Scorpion armor. We're not sure. Yeah, he goes off with the Vizarch and the Yinkan, recruiting Eldar from all factions. It's really cool. There are technically only 3 Yanari models. All the rest of them are Eldari or Harlequins or Drukhari. They just now have the Yanari special rule instead of their special rules. So Drukhari, which is what I played before, rather than power from pain, they get strength from death. Strength from death is broken, but we won't get. It was broken. It's less broken now. But when they first made it up, it was so broken. I essentially got 3 turns in one with a unit of Harlequins, threw them across the board, and just it was amazing. Yeah, they do that. I like how Brad completely left out that after Cadia blew up and Lord Asurkar E. Creed was leading the remnants through that mess of a thing that was left, it was the Yanari that saved them.
Creed is not saved.
Oh,
Creed is
right, fair
currently
enough.
MIA. He's probably
yes,
on
all
a
right.
display
He got kidnapped by a Necron, but it was the Yanari that saved the army.
Yeah, Creed is in one of Trazen's Pokeballs right now, basically.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll get out at some point.
That is a cool addition to the Necron lore, which I enjoyed.
I actually have Trazen the Infinite on my desk right now. He's sat with my other Necrons.
But yeah, they basically take that army into the webway. There's a lot of interesting fighting going on there, especially with Ahriman of the Thousand Sons, because there's a slight incident that happens, and they kind of accidentally give some of the Thousand Sons their souls back temporarily.
Ooh.
Which.
But aren't they all just dust in suits?
Yes, they are. Until temporarily, while Ahriman is fighting the Yanari, they are not. Then Yvraine kind of yanks those souls back, and Ahriman is very upset about this. So there's a load of fighting in the webway. Basically, nearly all the Phoenix Lords wind up turning up, along with Lilith, who's on the Yanari side now, which is interesting. They wind up turning up to help, and it culminates with the other half of the revival of Big Bobby G. Because on the other side from Belsarius Cole, with his Armour of Fate, is Yvraine, with the Crone Swords and essential mastery over life and death. And she basically fish hooks Papa Smurf's soul from wherever it was wandering out in the Ethereum and stuffs it inside the Armour of Fate. Which is why he can't ever take it off.
He can now take it off.
Oh, he can now take it off. He couldn't ever take it off at that point. But that's that. Obviously, Slaanesh is somewhat opposed to dying. So they're currently being hunted by all sorts of Slaaneshi demons, trying to find the rest of the Crone Swords. And so that's the Yanari. That's what went on there. And a lot of the remaining, like Drukari and Eldari, don't like them. Avstroil Vect, or however you pronounce his name, the leader of the Drukari, really doesn't like them, because they basically stole almost half his forces.
Fair enough. I mean, that would annoy me. Forces are expensive, as we all know.
But yeah, that's what's been going on the Yanari side of things.
I mean, that's great, because I had no idea what Yanari were, so they're completely new as far as I was concerned. I get that they were Eldar-ish, but that explanation was great.
Oh, good.
Is there any other kind of key stuff that I might have missed, like lore-wise?
You said you read the new Necron stuff with like the Silent King coming back.
Yeah, I mean, like that's. I feel like that kind of is a throwaway comment in the grand scheme of the kind of more pertinent stuff we've talked about.
Well, it depends how much they progress the thing, because do you remember the reason he turned back and came back?
I mean, I thought he was going back because they were going to take over all the Blackstone things.
No. The reason the Silent King turned back, because he was going to leave. He put himself into exile because he was so ashamed of what had happened. So he was going to leave. He was going to leave the edge of the galaxy and be gone.
Oh, sorry. He wants to put the Necrons back into people.
Yes. But essentially, the reason he turned around in the first place is because he exited the galaxy and he saw the rest of the Tyranid swarm.
Right, yes.
And basically thought,
I went, oh dear.
Shit, and turned right around. Because he knows that the galaxy, as it is, cannot possibly stop them.
And essentially, he thinks the galaxy needs a certain amount of biomass in it for the Necrons to be, have proper bodies back.
Yeah.
Yeah, which makes sense, yeah. Sorry, I just, if there's any other key points that you need to raise, I feel, but otherwise we can move on.
The only other one I would raise briefly is what happened to the Tau. Because back in 3rd edition, they had the 3rd Sphere expansion, where they sent out a bunch of ships and colonized a bunch of worlds. Then the 4th Sphere expansion happened and disappeared, and kind of all the ethereals died, and they kind of became cannibals in the 4th Sphere expansion. And then the 5th Sphere expansion went out and it was all fine, but they found the 4th and kind of went, oh god, what went wrong? So the Tower now, they've got a much bigger empire relatively than they had, which is starting to piss off the Ultramarines. But
didn't Farsight do something?
Yeah, he
Farsight
did a few.
Rebelled. Yeah,
he did a few bad things.
He made his own enclave, I think.
Yeah, I'm not up on the Tower lore, but I vaguely remember I vaguely remember something along those lines.
But I mean, the lore is so rich in 40k, right? I don't expect you to fully film in on like 7 years of stuff and a whole load of novels.
Oh, good. That would take a while.
There are entire YouTube channels dedicated to just the lore. So yeah.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And maybe if you can compile a list of a few good ones to throw in the links, I can also watch them in my own time. But I think those were like the key things that kind of confused me coming back to a world that wasn't quiet as I left.
Yeah. The salient point is that you are now further into the grimdark future where there is still only war, but there's also a little bit of nuance going on, and it's interesting.
And we have been given the most cruelest gift of all, hope that the Imperium might actually be able to dig itself out of this mess. The cruelest.
I think actually, we're almost throwing back to the very first episode that we did when I outlined why I liked what they'd done and why I liked Age of Sigmar, because there is hope now. There's not a lot of hope, but everyone might not be fucked.
Trust
They're
not
probably
to
fucked,
hope.
but they might not. Hope is the first step on the road to disappointment.
Oh, that's a good lesson for all the kids out there to learn.
You can thank the 3rd edition Space Marine Codex for that. So yeah, that is the end of our first of 3 specials, which is on the letting Wilko know what is up with 40k at the moment. So hopefully you'll be able to join us for our next one, which will be on Fantasy Age of Sigmar, where the swords aren't quite as powered and we don't have machine guns, except when we do.
So we've got Stephen Clare on the cast. Yeah.
I was going to say, we don't have machine guns. Are you quite certain of this? Well, actually, no, to be fair, it's a Gatling gun, not a machine gun. So
yeah. So with that, it is good night from me.
And me.
Oh, and me.
And me, I guess. I did just want to throw in one last thing, actually, as part of the outro. I started a new Instagram channel called Wilko Paints because I've got a load of models to make from the Indomitus box. So I'll throw that link in there, and then
Sweet.
I know Astrocast has a nice Instagram channel as well that has photos of me and Brad playing Warhammer on it. So
I should really post more pictures.
People should follow that too.
Well, to be fair, if we
put all your shiny models
if we get
on
this Path to Glory thing started, we can have a lot more pictures, possibly even video.
Ooh.
We will discuss Path to Glory in the next episode.
Yes.
Join Mike and Tom for nerdy conversation with a multitude of guests on Hat of Many Things.
Say hi, guys.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
I'm Mark, a librarian and professional wrestling ring announcer.
Cast League of Legends.
Soteros Filbricato, best known for my work with White Wolf and Onyx Path Publishing on the World of Darkness.
Hi, I'm Jason Carl. I'm the producer of V5 at White Wolf.
Yeah, my name is Johanna Pettersson. I'm a Finnish game designer.